Hello, everyone. Welcome to the LightSong podcast. My name is Sarah Marie, and we have on the show today Midge Houlihan Mead, who has been with the LightSong community for 13 years, about the same amount of time that I have actually. We took our first introductory courses together. We took the level two together, and we've been in many of the advanced classes together. You've been my assistant in some of those advanced classes. I had a baby, so I took some time off and you kept going. And so I have the pleasure of having you kind of show me the ropes sometimes, which I love. I think that's a wonderful part of how Lightsong operates is that there's no real hierarchy. We're all helping each other as we go along, wherever we're at. We meet everyone where they are. I think that's a lovely component to us. Yeah, and I'm super excited to talk with you today, Midge, about what your experience has been with Lightsong, because we've kind of gone through it together at different paces, at different speeds. And I know that you continue to be a part of the Lightsong community in a significant way, and that you are often right there at the beginning with so many students assisting with our level two class, which happens right after our level one class. And I'm curious, Midge, if you can kind of give us an idea of who you are and who you were. I like starting with the spiritual context, like how you were raised, what were your belief systems, in your growing up years, and then later on in adult life, did they change? And how did you find light song? Those kinds of things.
Okay, well, thank you, Sarah Marie. I'm really happy to be here today. I remember you when you first came, and I think it's easier for us to see others in the ways that they've changed than it is for us to really see ourselves in everything that we've gone through. But um, I grew up in upstate New York ish, about an hour outside of the city. And I was raised what I would like to call a sometimes Catholic because we went to church just on Easter and the midnight mass of Christmas Eve. And but we still had to go through all the instructional classes and learn the prayers and go to confession um, up until we were probably we in second grade where we did our communion. So
Mhm.
it was a big deal, and you always had this side relationship with God, but um, I really just felt a lot of the time that I had the guilt, but not the community. So,
Mhm.
for instance, we would go to church and you would go into the confessional box and you would say your what sins you had committed to the father who's inside the box, and he would give you prayers to say, and you would go say those prayers to be absolved of your sins. Well, I was too embarrassed to say my actual sins. So even though, and this is probably a little bit later, even though I may have like stolen something from my brother or kissed a boy, I would never tell a priest that. So I would make up sins like I swore or I skipped class. So in reality, when I look back on it, it's like I learned to lie,
Mm.
professional. So that made me feel even worse. But um, the way in which religion helped me was that I knew that I could have a relationship with a spirit that I couldn't see.
Oh, interesting.
And so religion put me in good stead for shamanism because it wasn't that big of a leap for me when
Mhm.
I decided. to look for something, I want to call it bigger, something bigger than
Yeah.
religion.
So I'm curious about how religion helped you believe that, because I feel like a lot of people's stories is that it actually kind of undermined their understanding or belief in the supernatural because it just felt like a set of rules and it didn't actually feel like there was a connection to anything divine. So I'm curious if you had supernatural experiences or if you always had a sense of knowing.
I always had a reverence for what the religion pointed to, and
Hmm.
I understood somehow that the restrictions put on it were from man, that men had written the Bible and had decided to put some things in there, or people had written these things. And this idea of like a vengeful God, it it didn't really ring for me true. I felt benevolence, and it's interesting because it did take me a long time to realize that I could have my own relationship with God. That probably didn't happen for me until my midlife. And once I realized that, then it got easier to search for. It opened the door for searching for the quality that that relationship would take on.
Hmm.
And I did have some supernatural experiences. They came to me through family members passing over.
Hmm.
When I was in my 20s, my brother died, and he was just in his early 30s. And I could feel him, even though he was in a different state, dying. And I experienced, he was, I feel that he helped me. He came to me and said, you know, this is what I'm experiencing, so I don't want you to be afraid. I don't want you to be sad. He didn't have any words, but that was the effect that it had on me. And he showed me how, and I didn't realize it at the time. It would take me 20 years to understand what I was seeing, but he showed me how he was being compressed and down and down and down into a tunnel. And then he was released in brilliance and reverie out the other side.
Wow.
And I've come to understand that he was showing me, just as we are a spirit and we get birthed into our bodies. When we die, we are a spirit that is being born back into a spirit.
Mhm.
And that's what he
That's
was showing me, was his release.
wow.
And I didn't know how I knew that he was dying. I didn't know how I was connecting with him. And later on, you fast forward 20 years, I have another sibling who's dying. And then I had my father dying, and um, more unique experiences with them where my sister was there lifting my mother and I up. We were just floating.
Mm.
And she was telling us, you know, because you're crying, you're in such grief, and she's telling us it's okay. I'm okay.
Hmm.
And so I could feel these loved ones and these spirits around me, and I wanted to know how to communicate with them. I didn't know how. And so I knew that there was more. So I always say that my doorway to LightSong was grief.
Wow. That's a beautiful story, and what a gift that your family gave you in their transitioning was not only the knowingness that they were okay, but also the insight into there is more than this. And I can reach you. And they left you with the curiosity of how can I reach them?
Yeah.
That's wonderful. And so that brought you to Lightsong or just to shamanism in general?
It brought me to searching, and I quickly went through a lot of things, modalities. Went into Reiki and examined Buddhism and Taoism, and um, did near death experience research, listened to some fun psychics like Sylvia Brown. I thought she was great.
Mm-hmm.
And I ended up in a drumming circle. I had bought a book first, and it was Awakening Spirit, I think, with Hank Wasselman and Sandra Ingerman. And they, in there, go through journeying. And so I had started journeying based on this book. And then I live up in the woods by Lori Shansky,
Yeah.
and I somehow got, I think it was early on, it was before much on Facebook and stuff like that. I'm not even sure how I heard about her drumming circle. So I ended up at a drumming circle at her house. And I didn't know that this is what we were doing, but we were journeying, and it came really easy, and the information was fabulous. I mean, it was just so rich. And so then I learned about LightSong from Lori in level one, and I decided to take level one, not thinking that it would ever go any further than that.
Mm-hmm.
And in level one, I found that the journeying that I was doing was indeed the same thing. And it took a while for me to realize it, but I now think of, for me, I think of journeying as direct revelation.
Mm. Direct revelation from, would you call it God, or are you still using that word to kind of describe where the direct revelation is coming from? Or does it feel different than that?
The word God doesn't bother me anymore, but I know it has a lot of charge for a lot of people. So God is a fine word to use, but also, you know, all that is to
Mm-hmm.
me is another really good concept, because I like the idea that we are all an expression of one, learning and exploring, and
Mm-hmm.
everything that we experience helps to develop all that is.
Mm-hmm. So when you were in your level one class and you're having the journey experience, you're having your direct revelation, did it feel like what you were expecting when you went into that class, or was there something that felt surprising?
It felt really reaffirming.
Mm-hmm.
It and filling. I felt fulfilled. Um, it was it was what I was expecting, but then there was more because of the way that Jan connects you into realizing that you have everything that you need inside of you. You just need to access it to remember. And that was really good to hear.
Mm-hmm. I could see that being an important like facet of the learning in that class coming from a religious background because I come from a religious background as well, and it's a consistent theme I believe in the Christian religions and Catholicism to believe that you need an intercessor, that you need some kind of go-between in order to access God. And it is a beautiful uh knowing or awareness or remembering to be told that you actually have what you need in order to have that direct revelation, in order to have that direct communication with whatever is beyond what we are here.
Yeah, and the reality that you are part of that divine.
Mhm. Right, that
And
there's a continuum,
mhm,
that we're all part of the same thing. We're just kind of expressing in different forms. Yeah. Mm. Do you feel like after the workshop, you felt distinctly different, or did it feel more like a natural evolution of where you were going?
it was definitely um, a, a natural evolution. I didn't really feel different. I felt excited
Hmm.
because this door had been opened and I was going through it, and I now had so much more to explore, and I'd found something that was deep, like that had a lot of content, like
Hmm.
shamanism, that whole idea. And it wasn't until I was in level 2 that I really understood how my mind, I have a very strong mind. I'm a capable, um, intelligent person, but my mind was trying to do everything. And in level 2, I recognized how I was holding myself back just by being only in my head. And the challenge of coming at anything from your heart space instead
Hmm.
of just your mind, because I find I've realized now how circular our mind is and how limited it is because of that.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so, and that was in level 2 where I really began to access the deeper realms of my own emotions and my intuition.
Hmm. Hmm. So I want to go a little bit into the level two in a moment, but I want to talk just briefly about your level one experience because there are so many stories that come from level one that feel or described as dramatic validations of things that they had thought to be true, or um, there's a moment in time in the class where it's like their aha moment. You know, Sarah Gurin, I think you're familiar with our lovely student Sarah Gurin, you know, talks about how her power animal like literally came up to her window and basically knocked on the window and said, "Hey, here I am." And so I'm curious if you have any stories like that that you could share from level one.
Hmm. No, I the only thing that really sticks with me is I felt very strongly like I was shedding my skin.
Mm,
I had this image of a snake. I had this image of this old bag of like where that had contained my life.
mm,
I had this just this feeling of renewal, and um like I guess the imagery was telling me, you know, you're not going to be the same. You're changing. And change is inevitable, but we as humans often fight it, not realizing that that will make us unhealthy.
mhm,
And so this idea of being a snake or a serpent and shedding my skin and renewal was all this imagery that I kept getting as we were driving to level 1, because Vicky ended up going with me. And, you know, we didn't know anything about LightSong. We did not know anything. And we just dove in, and the weekend was wonderful.
mhm. Yeah. can't remember if we had level one together. I think it was just level two that we met, where we met. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Because I remember you both in level two. We had a really big class. I want to say we had 40 something people in that class.
We did.
Yeah. And I talk about level two as feeling like undergrad. And then all of the other classes, are, your sophomore year, your junior year, your graduate school. And so, like you were in my freshman class. That's how I think of you. And
Oh,
you really bond. I at least I felt that way with the people that are in that class because you're all in that seeking place. You're all pretty much at the same level of understanding where you are in the curriculum, essentially. You're all starting at the same place and you're all in this discovery place. You're all curious. There's so much healing that happens in level two. You basically get a healing every month and then you get to practice that modality for a month until you learn the next skill. And there's an intimacy that's created when you're in that kind of environment that I don't think you can really find anywhere else.
that's
At
what I was gonna say.
least I have
It's
not.
so personal. It's
Hmm.
you really do bond with people.
Yeah. I mean, and I feel like that was part of what drew me to Lightsong was the community aspect. I had never really felt so connected to people that were like-minded in this, in the same way that I was, and that really had a pursuit for knowing what else was out there in at the time was felt like an unconventional way because it was so new to me. And I was coming from such a strict religious background. It felt, it had that mystical, magical feeling that I had been longing and hoping was true and was out there. And then to find out that there's this whole school built around it was literally world changing for me. Um, so
Yeah,
talk a little bit, Midge, about why you decided to go into level two. Because it sounds like you had a pretty solid sense of journeying and you had already been kind of exploring and dabbling in that world. So what was it about level two that made you say, yeah, I want to make this commitment? Because at the time it was an 18-month commitment.
yeah, it was 18 months, and the cost of it gives you a little bit of sticker shock.
Hmm.
And I had Jan call me and talk to me personally, and I liked that. And she talked about how she felt that we should be teaching this to children
Mm,
and people should grow up with these skills, and that was her hope for the future. And she talked about how it would change me and that I would not be the same.
hmm.
And I examined, what was it that I want? And I'd found something, like I said, that was deep, it was rich, it had a lot of content. So I decided to, that I could do it, that I was gonna suspend any of the reasons I was telling myself that I couldn't do this. And I just gave myself permission to try it and see what it was like.
Hmm. Hmm. I like that. I like the idea of giving yourself permission to do it because I don't know if this is if I'm picking up what you're putting down, but the permission um to be committed to something that you don't know what's going to happen.
Mhm. Wow.
You don't there is no like this is the end, this is what you can expect because it is such a personal journey. Everybody's experience is transformative in a way that I don't think is duplicated, right? It's you can't duplicate what happens to you. It doesn't look the same in every person. And so it's the permission to take a risk and
Uh-huh.
to have fun with it. Um,
Yeah.
how
And
could you not have fun with, learning how to essentially astral travel into these realms, talking to these beings that are beyond your imagination.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I did have an experience in level 2 that was very validating. And I remember I was with Kristen, I won't say her last name, and we were doing the channeling and contacting a loved one for the other person. And Kristen was contacting my brother for me. And I have a sister with a very particular name. And in order to make this real for me, he was using my sister's name.
Mm-hmm.
And Kristen's over there, just talking away and saying stuff from my brother. And I'm just like, holy cow, this is actually him. This is so
Mm-hmm.
cool. And we get done, and I'm like, so Kristen, you know that name you were using? And she's like, what?
Mm-hmm.
She was in it. She was doing it, and it was a fabulous experience. But before I lose this train of thought, I was going to say that early on, as I was noticing myself change and wanting to change, there was two things that I noticed. One was that I needed to monitor my thoughts and change them if they were particularly negative or heavy or self-attacking. And then the other thing was, whenever possible, I needed to say yes. So bringing it back to the challenge in life is not to say no. We're
Mm-hmm.
good at that.
Mm-hmm.
We come up with every reason in the world to not do something or to say no. The challenge is to say yes.
Mm-hmm. Why does this feel like something to say yes to?
For me, it's because, like you said at the beginning, there is no hierarchy, there's just support.
Mm-hmm.
This community is just finding different ways to help people on their journey, not to rescue them, not to feed them any kind of rhetoric per se, but to say, what do you need? And we'll walk with you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so I needed that.
Mm-hmm.
I was going down from grief and from being circularly in my mind. I was in a lot of pain. And pain can be very instructional. I mean, that's an opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
And but as a human, I have a lot of resistance, and so I really needed to recognize that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What's coming into my field of awareness as you're talking is it feels like there was a specific ally that worked with you in grief. Is that feeling accurate, or am I just making that up?
No, I think that's probably accurate. One of the um, experiences that I had when my father was passing, he went into a illness crisis just the week before Christmas. And Christmas is a big time for me, my children, and my husband. We are all together, and my kids were all still living at home. And I felt I had to go to be with him, but I was leaving my family. And when you're raised in a rough environment, to leave the safety of what the unit that you've created with your husband and your children, and then to go into the wolf's den does
Mm,
not feel good.
mm,
And I was doing it because of my love for my parents, out of duty for being a daughter. And I just knew that I needed to do it, but it tore me apart.
mm,
And I was just standing in my living room sobbing, sobbing. I was, trying to come to terms with wrapping everything up and getting on the airplane. And I was just beside myself. And I felt this presence stand beside me and put a hand on my shoulder, and everything just fell away.
Mm.
I had no distress. It was peace. I immediately stopped crying. Everything was fine. And for the rest of that day, whatever I needed to do or get done, the waters just parted. If I went to the post office to mail presents, there was no one in line. If I went to the store to finish the shopping, I just navigated with ease. Nothing was in my way. And I felt at peace with what I needed to do. So it felt, like a very specific ally who's with me.
Is this someone that you currently work with, or was it only for that moment in time?
To my knowledge, it's not someone that I work with, but I'll tell you, I mean, I do have my dream team and I have my specific allies, but from Lightsong mostly. And for me, there is this unconscious following that's happening. It's more of like the Wu Wei that they describe in Taoism. It's like diving into the flow and just going. And I've asked at different times, why do I experience this way? Why am I not talking to a specific guide who's here like other people have? And that's not how it really works for me. There's it's much more of a knowing and a feeling. And if I call on a specific person, or there might be a guide that shows up during a healing that I'm doing for someone else, but as far as walking into that healing, it's with my power animal, with my
Hmm.
extraction ally, with my teacher and my dream team.
Hmm. Hmm. So you do have a set group, I'll say, of people that you work with, but it's not always, or of beings that you work with. But it also sounds like there's room for there to be beings that kind of step in.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, as you were talking, I feel, we have our inner circle of guides, and then I feel like there are these, concentric circles of guides that come out. And when
Mm-hmm.
you were describing your story, it felt like someone who just kind of stepped a little closer for that moment, and then, worked with you through that moment, and then went back to maybe a further out ring after that moment in time happened. And I love the way that you've been kind you described that experience, and have even kind of shifted into what you work with more regularly, because I think it's nice to remember that as students, it, things are always going to be in flux. And as a person who is coming into this work with curiosity, maybe not even attending the school, but just listening to the things that we talk about, that there is no hard and fast rule, and that things are not black and white, that there is this malleability and flexibility to the way we're experiencing not only ourselves but the spiritual realms as well. And so allowing for that to be okay and to exist really allows for there to be richness and depth to the experience. And that's something that I think Lightsong taught me specifically, is that being in that open place of things being not what you expect and being beyond what you can imagine allows for so much more, so much
Right. And I like you using the word allowing because, nobody can be harder on me than me.
more. Mm,
And that then, I can get in my own way, right? And when you hear about these other experiences that people have and you don't have them, that difference makes you wonder if you're okay or if you're doing it right. Or
Mm-hmm.
and I love the way that, Jan has reiterated that spirit isn't judging us.
Mm-hmm.
We're judging us.
Got chills when you said that. It
Yeah.
is it's something that I've heard her say many times too, and yet we're in this constant state of forgetting that.
Yes. Yes. It's it's hard. We don't just hear something once and learn it and do it and keep it. it's a, it's that onion. It's that growing. It's that being able to hold more every time you hear it and learn it a little bit further out.
One of my favorite stories that she's told in that vein of thinking is she shared a time when she journeyed to Jesus and asked Jesus if he forgave people, if he forgives. And he said no, because I don't judge. So he doesn't have to forgive. I remember that just like blew my mind to think of that just being a construct, that being something, that judgment itself is something we created. Um, that judgment is a limitation that we don't actually have to subscribe to.
Right. And as I was recognizing that, I realized that when we die, we're all treated the same and it doesn't matter what we've done. And it was mind blowing for me to think about the fact that perhaps Hitler is delivered into just as much love and light as I am. That, our transition is not about judgment as we've been told it is. Our transition is about dissolving back into spirit, and there, we have to deal with what we've done.
Mm-hmm.
But um like you said, Jesus isn't judging us.
Mm-mm. We come into this life understanding that everything is a choice. And this isn't necessarily a light song teaching, but the ways of light song open you up to knowing how to access the spirits in a way where you can ask your questions. And I've certainly sat in that place of asking about judgment, and um, have done my own research and the afterlife and all of that. And there have been, Hitler is the one that is often brought up, like what's Hitler doing now? And it being, there being often the response similar to what you said about how we have to deal with our own choices. We're the ones who have to sit and like look at how our life unfolded and decide whether or not that's satisfactory or not. And if we'd rather do something different and do it better, or make a different choice. And then that of course goes into the whole is time linear, and are we experiencing things chronologically because they are, or are we just dipping into time and space, and then when we die we go outside of it, and then we can dip back into a certain time and space. That feels like a much larger conversation.
Yeah, yeah. But
Yeah.
um in my life profession has been nursing,
Hmm.
and it's very easy in nursing to want to take care of everything and everyone. And when you come from a rough home, you want to fix everything. You want everything to be okay. And Lightsong has really helped me to be able to step back and get out of overcare, because I understand that everyone's experience needs to be respected,
Mm-hmm.
that what they're going through, they have the right to go through without my interference. And it can often be painful to watch very ill people, sick patients at work, but I can respect who they are, be compassionate, help them in the moment, and even be available for as a witness to them and their pain and their journey, but also to be that person too that is then standing there and not judging them for what's happening to them. And I used to feel guilty if I didn't feel bad. And it's like, well, this isn't about, I'm not responsible for what they're choosing, but I am responsible for how I hold them in my presence.
Hmm.
And being able to stay out of judgment and more in a witness supportive role, Lightsong has helped me to foster that
I love that.
ability.
That's beautiful. Yeah, not thinking about all of the steps that led a person to the place where they're at, where they're now your patient, but just coming to the moment with, we're here now. This is what we're doing now. We're here now. I was not a participant in anything that happened before, but you are showing up in my reality. We're showing up in each other's reality in this moment in time for an experience. And, when I hear you speak in that way, there's a part of me that acknowledges that, you too agreed to have this moment in time with them for some reason. There's some
Yeah.
kind of something that you're getting from the experience from them. There's some kind of awareness or learning or teaching or just way of existing that otherwise would not be happening if this person was not in front of you. There's always an agreement happening.
There is always an agreement happening. And when you recognize that, then there's so much more to learn from each patient.
Hmm.
Because I recently had a patient who was a wonderful man. He'd spent his life helping and rescuing people in various ways over 40 years. And he credited his ability to keep going with his relationship with God. But then and he had just like this beautiful Buddha energy. It was like, my gosh, there's just this Buddha energy here. And but then at the very end he went into a conspiracy theory,
Mm.
and he was very strong in that and very convinced in that, and he was trying to draw me into it. And I recognized that for whatever reason his mind was offline. He'd let his mind go into offline, into conspiracy distraction. His
Hmm.
mind was over here distracted, and I thought it's it's interesting because the world needs his Buddha energy right now.
Hmm.
And I thought, I need to be mindful of what I'm letting my mind do, and keeping it in the forefront that my mind is a tool to help me, but uh, is it in alignment with my own energy?
Hmm.
Yeah.
I think what I hear you're saying is not allowing like his energy to entrain your energy and pull it in a certain way. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah. And just choosing to engage with the part of him that made sense to you to engage with.
Yes.
Yeah. And basically it being none of your business what the rest of his mind was doing. Yeah. Yeah. I like that because, well, for many reasons, but I think it's that allowing in that permission place again,
Yeah.
that creates the space for you to be in relationship with a person in a way that feels good to you, and choosing to just not allow anything else to participate essentially in
Yeah.
that relationship, being the dominant energy.
There you go.
Hmm. Yeah. That's lovely. Let me just take a quick look here over some of my questions. This has been a really lovely conversation. I want to make sure that we're getting all of the info that we can get. So we've touched a little bit on the community aspect of Lightsong. What has that been for you? We talked a little bit in the beginning about why that has felt good and what was compelling about that. And I'm just wondering now, after 13 years, how your idea of the Light Song community has changed or taken shape or grown or evolved.
For me, I really like assisting.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think that I wasn't fully aware of how comfortable and tucked in the assistants in our classes made me feel until I was probably midway through level 2. And then it started to dawn on me what pillars these people were, just energetically, in like holding me in the room.
Mm-hmm.
Making it so I didn't run screaming. Um, and and like sometimes the healings that we experience in class can be so intense that you are beside yourself, that you're I have come up out of some journeys very surprisingly emotional,
Mm-hmm.
and I've never felt unsafe in a class with the other students and the assistants. I've just always felt really held.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, you develop that camaraderie and that with people. And like I feel that at any time I could call anyone in Lightsong if I had a crisis or a problem, and they would have words or love or energetic support for me. And it only takes a moment, because we all know that you don't need to be in the same room for healing to occur.
Mm-hmm.
And when people are ill and they need a little vitality, they can feel that coming in from other people in the community. So staying at the root structure of the classes as one of those pillars is where I feel really happiest.
Mm-hmm. I love that you described it as feeling tucked in
Yeah.
because it's so accurate. Because you do, it's just a natural course of the learning experience that you do come a little undone. And I think you're supposed to come a little undone in this kind of healing because you're unraveling the thoughts, the ways of being, the patterns of behavior that have, kind of created the unrest and the dis-ease um, that you're hoping to heal. And so it can get a little messy for sure. And you're right. The way that the containers are carefully curated for the learning experience and the healing experience is much, much different, I think, than anything I've experienced before, in the sense that it is safe. It is safe in many different levels, different layers, not just safe physically, but also energetically and spiritually. um, a lot of effort is put into making sure that you are set up in a way where you can have those really big, deep healings.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
And be learning and learning the same at the same time. It's such a level two so transformational in that way because you're learning how to be the healer while simultaneously healing at this core level.
yeah,
It's not, it's no joke for sure. It's definitely
right.
the real deal and so, so worth it. So worth the effort.
Yeah, yes. And yet you can understand when people start to get scared, or
Mhm.
they want to drop out, or they start looking for the exits, because it is intense. And as an assistant too, you can kind of be part of helping people to decide if they're just scared, or if they really need to be doing something else.
Right. Yes. And because every assistant has gone through the class themselves, sometimes more than once, and I have gone through the advanced classes, we have that perspective of knowing what it's like to be in that crisis moment and
Mhm.
to stay with it, and the benefit of staying with it and seeing yourself through to the other side and how worth it can be, for sure. But also knowing that timing is everything, for sure, and knowing that sometimes it is important to take a moment to put yourself together and then jump back in another time. But more often than not, it's definitely, um, I think the assistants are there to kind of hold your hand and keep you together and believe for you until you can believe for yourself that everything's gonna be okay.
Yes. That's a good way to put it. That's a good way to
Hmm.
put it. And Lightsong does offer you opportunities to stop and then start again. And I love that. It's not like you signed up for this level too, and if you don't finish it, that's it. It's not that at all. You're continually supported until you have all the material.
And
That's
we really do want you to succeed. And if life
yeah,
is happening in a way that is not supporting your success, we do recognize that, and we absolutely welcome you to come back at a time when it makes more sense.
right.
And it's possible for you to feel like you can be present with what's happening in the circles that we create for you.
Exactly.
Hmm.
Exactly. And as an assistant, I love rehearing the material
Mm,
and even deepening it when if you're in a lead position teaching the material, that's really learning it in a whole different way.
hmm.
And I am embarrassed to admit that it took me a long time to really understand that this is real,
Hmm.
that every ally I have actually exists. And Jan tells you this in level one, but it's like, yeah, okay. I mean, it's one thing to try and intellectually, yeah, okay, but then as you go through and it sinks in that there's an actual entity that's supporting you, that has its own life, that's choosing to interact with you, it's like,
I know. It is that kind of magic. It's the learning that fairies are real, right? Every little
yeah,
kid's dream, or that your superheroes are real.
yeah,
Um, it is that level of profound epiphany, I will agree, when you have that dawning awareness of this is not just my imagination. This is just not just a story that I'm telling myself so that I can feel better. They are autonomous, conscious beings that I have learned how to interface with. That is such a powerful place to be, and a healing place to be, and I think part of the undoing of people sometimes is the the awareness that I'm deserving of these kinds of relationships, that I am worthy of having, relationships with interdimensional beings or higher consciousness beings. That alone is part of the revelation of healing here at Lightsong.
yeah. And again, our first reaction is going to be to say no, but
Hmm.
how do we allow ourselves that
Hmm.
that present of
And what's great is about what you said too is, you said it took you a long time to understand that. And I think that's another beauty of Light Song, is that you have all of the time you need to have that
Mhm.
awareness. And there are many different ways that you can engage with the community to
Yep.
create the space for that awareness to come in. You have it as a student, you have it as an assistant. There are a lot of community events that we participate in and regularly hold that create the space for that. So there's more than one way for your learning and your teaching and your healing to come while you're here.
Exactly. And I love the fact that the podcasts are on there for free for anyone to listen to because
Yeah.
they seem to say there's this community, but then they can get to know the community through the podcasts before they even commit to anything at all or nothing, you know.
Right. And we do have a lot of free community events too, for those who might be wondering. If you go to the LightSong website, underneath the main menu, there is a listing for community events, and there's a lot of sound healing events. I know Karen does question and answer events so that you can simply come and just talk about things about like the format of a class
Yeah.
to the content of the class to, who are the people I'll be working with in this class. And then I know she does some more formal calling in the spirit, so you can have more of an experiential moment in time with us rather than something that's so heady and intellectual.
Hmm.
So many, many ways, and all can be found on the Lightsong website. Mhm.
Yeah,
Well,
it's
Midge, thank you so, so much for taking the time to talk to us. It's always a pleasure to have conversation with you. So thank you.
thank you. I really
Mm.
enjoyed it.
Is there anything that feels important to say before we go, or do we feel complete?
I feel fabulous.
Good.
I think I feel complete.
Me too. Thank you again. And until next time.
All right. Thank you, Sarah Marie.
Bye.
Bye.